Hello, my name is Mo Weindhardt, and I'm a Dharma teacher with the Empty Moon Zen Sangha. Welcome to our community's first virtual Zazenkai. This is new and exciting ground for us, our first all-day sit together in this online format. Thank you so much for being here. I'm humbled to speak with you today about liturgy, chanting, and the intimate practice of not knowing. Not knowing can be understood as a mind without preconceptions or prejudices. It's synonymous with beginner's mind, and this can be a difficult perspective to maintain, but I continue to find deep value in approaching life in this way, with openness and curiosity. As it says in the verse of the Kesa, vast is the robe of liberation. Back when I first began sitting zazen, or seated meditation, like most people in their late teens and early 20s, I knew a lot. I had already lived many, many lifetimes by then, which in some ways had softened me and in other ways had hardened me. I carried a fair amount of certainty and judgment, a proverbial chip on my shoulder, if you will, which at the time I found to be effective armor that seemed to protect me at least a little pain and disappointment. I resisted my own tender heart, having been ridiculed for feeling too deeply or caring too much. I found strength and solace in my independence and carried a deep suspicion of anything that smelled a little too similar to the religious roots of my early childhood. Anything that smacked of ritual for ritual's sake, or a do this because I said so mentality. I sat zazen for many years before I discovered a sangha, or community, to truly practice with. My first time joining a small sitting group led by Roshi James Muon Ford in Providence, Rhode Island, was welcoming and memorable. A Tuesday night sitting group that practiced liturgy and 2 periods of zazen with a dash of kinin in between, or walking meditation. I remember my initial refusal to bow, which lasted quite a while. And also, I remember how difficult I found liturgy. As someone who came to zazen independently from a sangha, or the various rituals that build a container for group practice, I had little context for Zen Buddhist liturgy. I had been steeped in silent meditation, largely by myself or with one other person, and of course lots of study. And aside from memories of old Christian songs and hymnals from childhood, I knew very little about chanting and had no real frame of reference for the liturgy I found myself invited to participate in. As a consequence, during more than a few of my first visits with that sangha, I just politely held the liturgy book, and while the rest of the group chanted, I didn't utter a single word. As it turns out, the word chanting comes from the French chanter and the Latin cantare. It's defined as a rhythmic, monotonous utterance or song, and historically in Buddhism, chanting and recitation served important functions that were used to help memorize all of the teachings. They were also forms of expression, often viewed by many Mahayana schools as coming from the true nature of the self. Well, of course, I knew nothing of this at the time. I was too busy protecting myself with a fair amount of certainty and judgment. My knowing mind felt safe. It took time for me to lean into my curiosity around liturgy and to approach things like the Great Heart of Perfect Wisdom Sutra, the 4 vows, the 5 remembrances, or the verse of atonement with sincere openness. As I later discovered, it's not unusual for liturgical chanting to sometimes make newcomers to Zen or Buddhist services uncomfortable. It's not really singing, but it's more than simply speaking. People frequently just don't want to do something wrong, make a mistake, or somehow embarrass themselves. Over time, as I got more familiar with chanting and continued to learn, I began to open more fully to the practice. In the beginning, it took great conscious effort to learn the different tones and tempos, the various instruments, to get comfortable with the different sutras and chants and ask about their meanings. It's a process that continues to unfold to this day, now taking place with a widespread Sangha over Zoom. Vast is the robe of liberation. But why do we chant? What's really the purpose of this? Chanting is about so much more than memorizing the Buddhist teachings. It's neither active nor passive. It's receptive. It is a practice of opening, of curiosity and experience, of constantly inviting our beginner's mind to the forefront. Not only can this lead to a deeper study of Buddhist teachings, over time it transforms into a practice of surrendering the discriminating mind, a way to loosen our intellectual grip. As you've probably experienced for yourselves, the rational mind just loves to pick and choose, to analyze and determine, often with great confidence, what it likes and doesn't like. The rational mind likes certainty. It likes to understand. As Genjo Marinello, the Zen abbot of Chiboji, a Rinzai temple in Seattle, has said, the discriminating mind is like a hammer. It is often the case that we go around hammering everything with our discriminating consciousness. And yet, we wonder why happiness is so hard to find after thoroughly banging on all that comes our way. In Zen training, we're taught how to practice putting the hammer down. In other words, how to disengage the thinker and fully realize the one who holds and wields the hammer. His words deeply resonate with me, and particularly regarding how I first approached liturgy. I was so preoccupied with picking apart and trying to understand the content that my knowing, discriminating mind actually kept me at a great distance from the actual experience of chanting. Thankfully, this was delightfully short-circuited when I encountered Dharanis. Dharanis are strange. They are strings of sounds that are deemed sacred or powerful, like the Shosai Myo Kichijo Dharani that we chanted together earlier this morning. The word itself, Dharani, derives from a Sanskrit root that means to hold or maintain. Derived from the Vedic religion of ancient India, where chants and melodious sounds were believed to have innate spiritual and healing powers, even if the sounds can't be translated and have no actual meaning. Even now, Dharanis are thought to protect the ones who chant them from evil influences and calamities. The words or the sounds are thought to have power. I've always believed that words have great power. What we say and how we say it matters. This was part of my early resistance to liturgy in the first place. I didn't want to say anything I didn't understand or believe in. Dharanis kind of turned things upside down. When I learned that they don't actually have a meaning, my reason for not participating in their chanting suddenly disappeared. Still, I did resist. The Shosai Myo Kichijo is a wonderful Dharani, whose words have no conceptual meaning, and yet they are deemed to be sacred and powerful, and I found it puzzling. How could that be? Why make these sounds at all if they lack meaning? What on earth is the point of that? And like a hammer, my discursive mind wanted to bang some logic and sense out of this, Thankfully, I didn't let that stop me, and I decided to give it a go. Once I got over feeling silly making sounds that don't have any meaning, I joined in the Sangha in this Dharani. And for the first time in my life, I surrendered to the experience of chanting. I didn't understand why at the time, but I found it surprisingly meaningful. As it turns out, the Shosaimyo Kichijo is an ode to Lakshmi, the Hindu goddess of light, wisdom, and fortune. It's understood to be the Dharani of good fortune that averts calamities in the mind. Over time, as I became more curious about liturgy and my vice-like grip on certainty just relaxed a little bit, I became much more interested in the Soto-inspired Zen liturgy service. I had many subtle and profound experiences chanting with that sitting group on Tuesday night, on many, many retreats. There was something incredible in hearing my unique and individual voice blend with the Sangha around me, in letting the words, sounds, and teachings wash over me, feeling the deep visceral resonance of a large group chanting in unison. And even though it still seemed ridiculous to think that, despite having no inherent meaning, Dharanis could actually bring good fortune or avert calamities in the mind, I enjoyed them nonetheless. As I became more curious and engaged with liturgy, the practice really opened up, and something I didn't expect was how much it also helped to open me up. It has been an unexpected and worthwhile journey, and chanting has become the zazen of my voice. It connects me with all of you, even across crazy physical distances. It also connects us across time as we form the very words, sounds, and teachings that Buddhists have chanted for centuries. We quite literally chant together across space and time, sharing a blend of our individual and collective expressions of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It can be a direct experience of oneness, of emptiness, one voice, one heart, greater than the sum of its parts. In fact, I recently learned something about Kukai, a great Japanese Buddhist monk born in the 8th century, who founded the Shingon school of Buddhism. And it's shaped my understanding of the sacredness and power of Dharanis, like the Shosai. And despite the fact that mantras and Dharanis have no literal meaning, Kukai argued that every syllable of a Dharani is a manifestation of our true nature, that every sound is a manifestation of shunyata, or emptiness. Rather than being devoid of meaning, Kukai suggests that Dharanis are in fact saturated with meaning. How vast is the robe of liberation? Chanting invites us into a direct, embodied experience of oneness. Perhaps for those who take up this practice, that is why sutras and Dharanis can often come to mind in times of need, times of uncertainty, disquiet, or loss. They offer a visceral connection with the Buddha's teachings about form and emptiness, Buddha, Dharma, and an opportunity for oneness beyond the discursive mind. They offer a chance to disengage the thinker, put down the hammer, and to fully realize the one who wields it. Chanting offers the intimacy of not knowing and invites us into the mysterious truth of just this. Perhaps that is the true fortune that averts calamities in the mind, a mind without prejudices, minds willing to be curious, embrace uncertainty, risk intimacy, and with some luck, to grow together in wisdom. Thank you.